Hey, welcome back for another Adobe Live. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you guys are at. My name is Idara Ekpa. I'm really excited to host today's live stream with Aaron Bernstein. Really excited to introduce his work. But before we get started, I really want to encourage you guys to really check out the creative encore of the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge with Voodoo Val. It's every Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific, so tune in and take your Photoshop skills to the next level. Now, today we have a really exciting show with Aaron where he's going to go ahead and show us his process of editing and animating food photos in Adobe Lightroom and Photoshop. So Aaron, I hope that you're excited because I know that I am. So welcome.
Thank you.
Of course. Just a few more announcements. If you are over on YouTube land, you need to make your way over to Behance, okay? That way you can join the entire conversation. We're gonna be asking y'all questions, creating space so that way you have any questions and comments that we can talk about throughout the live. So make sure you head over to b.net/Adobe Live so that way you can join the conversation. I always love the chat because we have so many people from literally all over the world. So if you are in the chat, go ahead and say hello. I would love to see where y'all are from. I'm seeing Sean is in the chat. I see Cody. I see, who else is up in here? Clever said that they're really excited. They also like animating food into their belly. So that's exciting. So if you are joining us today, go ahead and say where you're at and drop your name in the chat. But Aaron, I would love you to go ahead and introduce yourself. For those that know you, may not know you, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work and what we'll be doing today.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Aaron. I am a photographer based in New York City. I focus a lot on food and still life and product. And I think a lot of my work is in studio. And what really interests me about food is the colorful stories that it can tell and relationships, as well as the textural. I actually started in the fashion world. And so I think what initially drew me to like clothes and styling, I found really intriguing in food, and sort of have been making my transition over into that world over the last couple of years, and it's been really fun. I, as I said, live in New York, and I think another reason why I got really into food is because I learned to love New York through the food scene and through just like having to survive here every day before I like really knew what I wanted to do. And so it became this like sort of source of joy, and became like a really fun game almost every weekend to find somewhere new and find something new that I maybe didn't have access to before or didn't know about. So I'm very, very thankful that it is now part of my every day of my work, and it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aaron. I'm excited. Like, as a food lover myself, I think, and also as a fellow photographer, it is just so incredible how you can just tell stories through food. Like, I don't even think that I would have thought to do something like this. So it's incredibly creative. And then I also love your logo at the top that says Hungry Boy. And then like, I think the O has like a little bite bitten out of it. It's really dope as well.
Thank you.
Awesome. So I'm really excited. And I see y'all are in the chat as well. We have Sean is from Germany. Mustafa is from London. We also have Kira, who is from New Zealand. Clever from San Antonio, Texas. Viola, who's from Brooklyn, New York. I'm seeing Michelle as well. Megan from Western Canada. So we have literally a wide variety of people all over the place today. Before we get started, out of curiosity, what is like your favorite food project that you've done so far?
That is a good question. I did this series, I can actually probably pull it up on here a couple years ago. Um, Speaking of food in New York, sort of just like looking at the different iconic foods that Manhattan specifically has to offer and places. And so everything from hot dogs to pretzels to pizza.
Wow.
I did this project where I froze these different iconic foods from these iconic places in chunks of ice, trying to like preserve them. And I look at
Mhm.
like um, the idea of like over time things melting and thawing away, but these things sort of being like relics of Manhattan as we knew it and know it.
Mhm.
And then I photographed it all sort of like a museum archive, just like very
Oh,
straightforward.
wow.
It was a very I think I loved it so much just because I learned so much about ice and how to freeze things and how to get clear ice and how to make super
Yeah.
foggy ice and also how to like seal a bagel to be able to freeze it and things that just like you would never have to think about in the day to day.
Yeah. Oh,
And
wow.
that I never really want to think about again. But it was a super frustrating but like rewarding couple of months doing this project.
Oh
So
no,
it's
this is
still very special
beautiful.
to me. Thank you.
I
Yeah,
d-
a lot of
Wait,
fun.
this pizza, the way you like half froze it and like, oh no, that's I don't want to know how you did that or how long it took you to figure all of this out.
Yeah, I'm not like I feel like I'm not a very patient person
Mm,
by nature, and a lot of what I do in my work involves a lot of patience. So it's kind of the
hmm
only way that it's like forced upon me. And so basically everything was frozen in a mini cooler in my freezer.
mm,
I bought one like that could fit, and so some things like pizza, for example, like it wouldn't necessarily fit all the way, or I didn't think that it would create a very interesting image just to
hmm
be in a full chunk of ice like some of these other ones. And so I ended up like propping it up with a few like
mm.
dowel rods in a Ziploc bag to seal it, and then I just like so that it broke that surface and then like cut
Got
around
it.
the plastic bag. And yeah, it was a whole thing. I went through like two pizzas to get this silly process. So it was fun.
Well worth it. It was well worth it. It was well worth it. This is
Yeah.
awesome. So thank you so much for showing us this project. That is incredibly dope. So make sure y'all go ahead and follow Aaron on Instagram. Make sure you tap in because his work is absolutely beautiful. And I'm excited for today's session. So Aaron, how about you go ahead and tell us what we're going to be doing today? I know we're going to be going into Lightroom and Photoshop. So I'm really excited to see, what we can bring to life.
Yeah, so today we are going to be manipulating a pair of bananas into a pair of nunchucks. And I know that sounds super abstract, but I thought it'd be cool to walk through with you guys. I actually just did this project that came out yesterday with
Wow.
this creative agency called Yummy Colors. They're based here in New York and in Copenhagen. And basically, I think it was last year that they started this project called Concept of the Year, sort of in response to design trends, I guess against like the idea of like annual design trends and color forecasting.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted to create a bigger need for community and collaboration. And so every year now they come up with a concept that sort of captures the feeling going into the new year. And
Mm.
it's a call of, I think this year was 70 or 80 artists from
Oh
all over the
wow.
world. But not only artists, there are like lawyers and chefs and people from all walks of life, basically creating work in response to this prompt. So
Mm.
this year the theme was sleepwalking, and you guys can find out more by visiting www.sleepwalking.world to see all the projects. But the project that I did for them was called Food as a Weapon, and it was sort of this Animorph vibey series. This idea that in a dream things aren't always what they seem, and
Mm.
maybe like interpret them as something else. And so I thought it would be interesting to look at the ideas of food as control and more specifically
Mm-hmm.
food as a weapon. And so transforming these objects from their known state into an
Ah,
abstract state. So
that animation is
yeah.
so dope.
Thank
Wow.
you. So I did 4 pieces for the series, which again, you can view all on the website in full. But today we are going to focus on this guy and try to walk through it together and recreate it.
Perfect, perfect. Awesome. Well, I'm excited. And then I also see somebody asked if we're going to be using, which Lightroom we're going to be using. Is it going to be Lightroom Classic or the Creative Cloud?
So we're going to be in Lightroom Classic.
Okay, cool. That's
I,
I'm a classic girl, so
Me too. I will go ahead and switch over to that now, actually. So Lightroom Classic I use nearly every day. Because a lot of my work is in studio, I like to tether directly into Lightroom Classic so that I can see what I'm shooting, as you know, as well, like looking on the back of a camera screen can be so different from actually seeing how you're going to view the files when you go to edit them.
Yeah.
And it was it was something that I never really got used to or did until I would say the last 2 or 3 years, consistently enough to like feel really empowered to do this with clients and every day. But it's been like a super, super beneficial addition to my practice. I used to use Adobe Bridge a lot to like organize and view, and then Camera Raw to edit, and I still do. But I've also found that a lot of what I was doing there, I can do just as easily, if not better, in Classic. So I like Classic. I can't escape it.
No, I know that feeling. I can't either. Every time I try, I just make my way back, and I'm like, like expand. There's so much else, and I'm like,
Exactly.
Classic gives me what I want. So
I
I
know.
feel you on that. I feel you on that.
Exactly. So basically what I did for today was I went through the initial photos that I shot and then re-imported them into a new collection to work through together from the ground up. So as you can see down here, I have my images that I started with. I took these probably 6 months ago, and it was like 2 days before I was actually moving photo studio. So I didn't have too much of my equipment out or like rigging materials out to like really, really properly set things up. But I knew I wanted to prioritize like the elements in a very clean, sort of straightforward, flashy manner. So that's why on some of these you can see like my hands just holding the banana, because it was just easier than like unpacking the things that I needed to unpack, or just like really bad fishing line on like a really unstable C-stand. But the nice thing with personal work is like I can do what I know needs to be done to prioritize what I know that I need to get. And I think it can be kind of a fun challenge to know, like, for example, with these nunchucks that I'm going to like piece a bunch of images together to get that perfect pair. Even though it might look kind of sloppy when I shoot it, but I can do it as I need to work through things really quickly. So to start, I figured we would start with the bananas. I knew in order to get to sort of like to mirror this pair of bananas to get to a pair of nunchucks that I would probably want to use two. And then I also realized while I was shooting, initially I was just gonna like stick with the pair, and I thought that like something in here would be great. But then I realized that nunchucks actually, the way that I wanted to show them, were crossed in more of like an X formation. And over here, they're hanging by the same stem. And so I also went in and I shot the bananas individually so that I would be able to then later manipulate them to cross and layer as much as I need to have that full customization.
Yeah, of course. No, that's incredible. Oh, I'm so excited, and I think everybody is too. Clever said, "Now I want to see kung fu fighting on floor covered with banana peels." Marina said, "I always use Camera Raw, but I need to try to learn Lightroom for big projects with a lot of photos." Yeah, Lightroom is that girl. Like I love Lightroom so much. It has been with me from the beginning of my photo career till now, and I just can't. It has me in a chokehold, so I can't.
I agree, and I think as someone that was sort of struggling as well to fully immerse themselves into the Lightroom world, coming from Camera Raw, like the interface is so similar and so friendly to work between. And I know, especially like between Adobe products, they're super mindful of that. And so it was like a much easier transition than I
Mhm.
thought. And then at the same time, there's so much more to explore within Lightroom Classic that you can then add to your workflow,
Yeah.
which has been really great.
Awesome, awesome. So Maria, don't be afraid to transition over. You heard it straight
Yeah.
from Aaron. You know, it's doable. It's doable. Awesome. So where do we start today? First of all, if you don't mind me asking, what
Yeah.
made you decide that you would go from the banana to the nunchucks for one? And then two, um, what made you pick the color for the background as well?
Yeah, so I wasn't sure how many of these I was going to end up making. I kind of figured that like some just would not work out at all, and maybe I would get like a handful out of the whole set, and then I could like actually work with as many or as few as I wanted. So I ended up with four, but I at first I just like came up and named as many produce items as I could think of, and then it kind of expanded because I felt that it would take a lot of steps to transition, just with some of the shapes of produce or how like repetitive it can be with like either
Mhm.
you have something more tube-like and or rectangular or circular or whatever it is. So then I was
Mhm.
looking at it was in the summer that I did this. So then I was looking at like popsicles and lollipops. And so I was trying to
Mm.
think of foods that were interesting shapes to me that were simple enough that I could morph. And then I
Got
came
it.
up with a list of weapons. And I was trying to match, what I thought could make sense to line up pretty harmoniously, but still be simple enough to get from point A to point B. So I thought like two bananas to two nunchucks was a really great, easy connection just because they're both kind of like longer as it is. And but
Yeah.
there's still that interesting, you know, complexity of how the bananas become a straighter line and how they intersect with each other,
Mhm.
to get to that final composition. So I went through a lot of different pairings, but I think
Mhm.
another thing that really informed what I ended up with was that, and it's not truly something that I ever thought that I would have to look into or think about, but just like what weapons I could buy online or like what fake versions or like what I could
Yeah.
make. Because I think too, I didn't want, I kind of liked because this was such like a abstract approach. I liked the very like simple, straightforward graphic nature
Mhm.
of each weapon and of each food item, almost like
Mhm.
in a very cartoony way. So I wanted all the weapons to kind of be, as if they were like from a TV show that you could recognize.
Mm.
So like nunchucks is not the first weapon that I think of, but when I was looking at a lot of like old cartoons for inspiration, I found like
Yeah.
poison darts and like a ball and chain and nunchucks. And so I wanted to try to work with those things. And then I kind of found that I could make those things as I needed,
Mhm.
um, as I went along. So that's like a very long-winded explanation
No,
of
no,
how we
thank you
got
for
here.
sharing that. No, that brings so much perspective to, the thought process because it's just such a unique idea and concept. And so it's really exciting to just kind of hear what you thought of when planning out this shoot. So I think we're ready to go. If y'all have any
Yeah.
questions throughout this session, please drop them in the chat box. Again, if you are on YouTube, make your way over to Behance b.net/Adobe Live so you can join the conversation as well. And then with that, Aaron, take it away.
Sure. So one really cool Lightroom Classic tip that I can show you guys if you guys are newly adjusted or looking to adjust, is I'm going to do some basic editing in Lightroom before I bring the files into Photoshop, because I think that it's really easy to then apply the settings that I do on one edit to a full range of photos for
Mhm.
consistency. And so up at the top, I switch from my library to the develop panel once I have my select. I kind of cheated and already did the selects based on what I edited in the past. But it's great. I went in and I already kind of cropped, because these are isolated objects. I'm not too worried about like the full scene. I just need like that pair of bananas.
Mhm.
And then I just like kind of make these very simple adjustments. They're not as, I will further edit them in Photoshop later down the road, both as like an individual object and then in the piece as a whole. But I kind of just like to go in and like make some basic adjustments that I I've realized I don't know about you, but I kind of like tend towards editing images in the same way, in the same
Yeah.
default of like those first settings. Like I always bring up the values in the shadows.
Hmm.
I always like decrease the blackest points. I will bump the exposure sometimes.
Yeah.
The biggest thing for me is I really like the clarity slider.
Me
I
too.
can't talk about it technically. I have no idea technically how to properly explain what it does, but I like the extra crispness that it gives to like
Exactly.
the texture without feeling like you're destroying the image by sharpening it too much or, applying too many
Yeah.
filters.
No, I
Um,
agree with that. I agree. I
yeah,
love the clarity tool as well. And I don't know what it is. It's just that extra oomph that your image needs. So I
yeah.
1000% agree.
And I feel similarly about vibrance as well, sort of like really boosting those tones. I think I can get away with really pushing it just
Mm,
in the studio setups. I feel like, especially with like something like this that is so straightforward and so like yellow and red,
mm.
is I can like push it without it looking too insane.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I kind of just try to like make these adjustments to get something, and then I'll like go back in and realize like maybe I don't need to adjust the exposure as much, and I can
Mm.
like bring up the shadows even more. I know you asked about background color as
Oh,
well.
yes, yes.
And what I am prioritizing when I'm editing in Lightroom, or I guess in this case specifically, is I'm kind of only looking at the bananas. I picked red. I basically wanted to going with that like very cartoony
Hmm.
jump off
Mm.
point. Like I wanted a very primary palette. And so when I shot these things, I shot against red, against blue, and against like a creamy neutral. I think I might
Okay.
have tried a yellow as well, knowing that like I will probably end up just making the background from just like a colorful layer in
Hmm.
Photoshop, but I knew that I would want it to be like a warmer, probably reddish tone.
Got it.
I thought that it would work really well with like the black of the nunchucks and the yellow of the bananas, and it would
Yeah.
create like a really nice color story,
Hmm.
um, especially in relation to some of the others in the series. Like I think about it not just as the individual composition, but like overall how they all look together.
Mm. Okay,
Um,
that makes sense. That makes sense.
yeah, and I
So,
know some people when they are planning on like isolating out images will just shoot on white
mm,
to or a very neutral color or a very dark color. I like to do it in the same sort of like color family that I think it'll end up on just because I
okay.
it helps me with like the color temperature and the shadows and the highlights, and I think it just makes it like a little bit more real.
Hmm.
And it's more exciting to shoot, honestly. It just like
Yeah.
looks better.
Yeah.
I can like see the vision
Yeah,
a
you see
little
the
bit
vision
quicker.
while you're shooting instead of like, oh, just a white or neutral backdrop. We have a few questions before we continue
Sure.
more. So Sean is out here dropping some questions in the chat. So Sean's the first question. He says, "Do you have the banana tool? Do you use the? I actually don't know what the banana tool is.
Either.
I
Should we learn?
don't know what that is.
Might so no, I don't, but maybe I need it. Maybe I should look into it.
So, Sean, if you could provide some context, what is the banana tool? But the other question that he has as well is he says, not that it matters, but what camera and lighting setup did you use for this shot? And then he also, with that question, asked, why shoot ISO 200 in studio work and why F18 for two bananas?
Sure. Both great questions. So I shoot Canon, and I shoot it's a 5D Mark IV, just because it was
Mm-hmm.
something that I invested in when I went freelance. I wanted like the best camera that I could get, and I've always been a Canon person. Um, 200, I feel like, is my default in studio. And then when I was shooting this, um, oh, and my lighting, sorry, my lights are strobes, they're flash points. And F18, I shot this, I know it's a little extreme, but I was the only one shooting, like this was all set up on a tripod. I
Okay.
had a remote. I didn't know exactly where the bananas would fall and hang, and so I just to work through things quick enough. If I set that aperture to that range, I know that even if they like swing back or forward a little bit, like I can get complete crispness.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, it's just it helps me.
So you shot all of this. I didn't even peep that in the beginning. So you shot all of this by yourself.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
then that is crazy because I take a lot of self portraits, and so
Mhm.
I know that whole process of like the remote, tripod, etc.
Yeah, you
But
can see it up here.
when you're moving with like a moving object, I struggle with making sure I'm where I need to be. So when you're
It's
moving
tough.
objects, it sounds like it is.
It's something too that I definitely always like overlooked because I think like, oh, I can do that. And with something like, shooting a still piece of fruit, usually like I can set it up and rig it so that I am just behind the camera. I can even take the camera off the tripod. But in this case, like I wanted the same angle and I wanted to give myself a flexible enough frame. You can see if I crop out, like you can see my balance board, you can see
Okay.
my hand, you can start to see. And honestly, just because I was moving, I didn't have AC in the studio. I needed to get out of there. So just like this sort of like very messy setup was what worked for me that day.
Got it, got it. Well, thank you for sharing.
Of course. I also just looked up the banana tool quickly, and there's
Oh.
a few different kinds, but I do not have any of these. But I can't. There's one that basically, and I don't know if this is what he's talking about, but it cores out the middle of the banana so that you can fill it with like peanut butter or Nutella or something. So I
Oh, okay.
might
That's
have to
good to
get that.
know. That is good to
Yeah.
know. So thank you, Sean, for pointing that out because I did not know.
Right? I was like, that might be on a future holiday or birthday
Yes.
list.
Yeah. Exactly. All right. All right. I'm excited to continue. So what's next? So we've made some
So we
adjustments.
made some adjustments. The bananas are looking pretty loud, pretty bold.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm going to do, because I know that I have these two bananas that I will also need to use, is I'm just going to, instead of like trying to manually line up my settings, I'm going to copy and paste them over from this initial edit.
Mm-hmm.
So back in my library, I just right click, go into develop settings, and then copy settings. And what's really cool is you can choose what settings you're copying over. So let's say, for example, like the image is already cropped custom how I wanted them. So I don't want to copy over the cropping, but I do know that I basically just made curve adjustments and basic adjustments. I didn't really do anything else. So it will then only take these settings from this one, and then I'm going to apply it to the bananas as well. And then you can see that they load.
Perfect.
And now these three files are pretty similar.
Yes.
So that gives me like a pretty good base. I'm also going to go in and do the same thing to these elements for the nunchucks. And basically what I did is I really liked this composition. I thought I had some other ones when I was doing selects that were maybe a little bit more crossed, but I thought to like try to keep the scene tidy, just keeping them crossed more at the top to sort of mirror what the bananas were initially doing made the most sense. But then you can see that the chain is really wonky. I'm holding the base of it because it was hot. And so I also pulled out other elements of like a chain curve that I liked, as well as, I guess I selected the wrong one. Did I? No. Also on this one, just looking at the base of that nunchuck that I can then copy over and paste over here. I'm trying to think what this one I was looking at the metal part and just like a cleaner metal where I didn't have to worry about the chain intersecting. So I'm going to also paste my same settings from the banana onto the nunchucks, onto that like main pair. And then what I can go do from here is, because all of the like color temperatures and saturation is the same, this actually looks pretty good to me. But if I wanted to like bring out those highlights a little bit more on the middle, or even like keep these a little darker overall, I can just slightly make those adjustments where the background looks pretty similar. And then I'm going to recopy those settings and then
And
apply
then
them
paste them.
to these guys over here.
Perfect.
So that gives us our base images. I think. I hope that's all the elements that I need. From here, I basically go and export them as their own files. So I will do a subfolder of selects. I will rename these to Adobe Live.
And while you do that too, so Cody said we got some clarification on the banana tool.
Okay.
So apparently it's a tool in Photoshop. Cody also said it was a secret. So
okay, we're
not hip to the secrets. So I don't know that at all. Okay, perfect. So we're exporting right now.
We are exporting, and I exported
you
these.
You can export more than one image at once?
Yes. So I selected all of them.
Oh, I didn't even know you could do that. I'm always individually export. And it just
really?
It's a drag.
Yeah. Well, now you know. And what's nice is if you're renaming them, like let's say it's like select or something and you wanted to sequence them, it'll automatically sequence them for you as well. I went in and I just kept the original format, which was a raw file, which is probably excessive, but I wanted to show you guys what happens if you open it in Photoshop or if you change your mind. And so basically I'm gonna come over here and I'm going to pull up my Finder. Okay, so in my Finder, I had them export into a subfolder. I will start with this one. I'm a big like drag and drop kind of guy. I'm not a big Finder top bar window kind of guy.
Oh yeah, we drag and drop over here. Like
yeah, it's just like, it's just easy. I don't know, creature of habit.
Yeah.
So this will still open it in your camera raw window because it is a raw file, but you can see that it carried over all of those custom adjustments that I made in Lightroom. Sometimes I don't know if it's again just like a creature of habit thing or because I want to work with it and as like as high as a quality as possible. But it's just how I open images to make sure that everything still looks good and that there are no further adjustments.
Okay, perfect.
I didn't hide this.
Now we are in Photoshop.
So now we are in Photoshop and I'm just going to isolate this guy and pull it off of the red backdrop to have that like base pair. So the way that I isolate is with color range. Again, it's something that I think works really well for me because I work a lot in studio with very like clean, colorful backgrounds. And so it's just like become a really easy way for me to be able to do that. And so basically when you select color range, you kind of like use the eyedropper to pick the shade that you're trying to select. So even just like with one click over here, you can see that white is what it's selecting. And my priority here really is just to isolate as much as I possibly can around the bananas. I don't really like, you can see my hand shadow. It's probably not going to select it. That's okay. You can change the range of what it's selecting using this slider over here. I think sometimes you can see if you go like all the way up, it starts picking up those. Yeah, so I usually keep it kind of in the lower half, but then you can also hold down shift and click around to pick up other tones as well. So I picked up like a slightly darker one, maybe something in the shadows, and maybe I just adjust this a few times to feel good luck. I feel pretty good about that. So as you can see here, it looks like there's clean white around the banana pretty well. And then that gives us our selection.
Oh, perfect.
And from here, I just create it into a mask and I invert it. And so you can see if we go onto our mask, like it looks pretty good. It looks like maybe with a few spots on the peel that need to like be painted in to stay selected. So basically I'm in the adjustment mask and I just want to make sure that like in the actual part of the image that I want, everything is white, is visible so that it's not there, or so that it is there, excuse me. And then from there, I'll go in with my black paintbrush and then I will just sort of clean up around the rest of the
Okay.
frame to get rid of everything else. And then I kind of will just like eyeball this part to get rid of the fishing line to start.
Mhm.
And then you can kind of see the progress. Like it's looking pretty good.
It's looking pretty good. That is pretty phenomenal how accurate that was able to be. And like it's not much cleanup after that point.
Yeah, it's not too bad. And honestly, the reason why I started using it, I think was because in portraiture, like with hair, like selecting and
Oh
masking out around
yes.
hair has always been so tricky. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just like one tool that I found that I could use to really only focus on that area and then refine
Mm-hmm.
it easier than like painting it out or using a quick selection tool or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it may be. So, and then I just sort of adapted it from there, maybe out of laziness, maybe out of skill. Who's to say?
Who's to say? Listen, sometimes you just gotta use the resources you have. Why make your life harder? No need
Exactly.
to.
And that's also like the beauty of working in Photoshop is like there might be wrong ways to do things, but like to each
Yeah,
their own.
to each their
Nobody
own.
has to know your process. Like do whatever works for you as long as you're not destroying the photo, like you're fine.
Exactly. Awesome. So our
So
bananas are ready to go. They're
bananas are pretty ready to go. And so what I like to double check too is I'll create a solid color layer where this is automatically selecting the color, the last color that I picked to
mm-hmm.
mask out. But sometimes I'll just put it against like either really dark or either really light. I think in this case it makes sense really light just to make sure that the edges look
Mm-hmm.
good. So I can already see like in here, maybe I missed something that I then need to go
And clean up a little bit more.
paint out. But overall, it's looking pretty good. You can see that there's this slight edge around the bananas in general.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it might just be because they were incredibly bruised from me transporting them. Part of it just might be residual from the red of the background.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like the biggest deal, as you can see, even when you change it to a warmer tone, like they disappear pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But even as I start to move into this slightly like lighter orange tone, you can already start to see the difference.
Yeah.
So something that I actually recently have started to implement is I will unlink the adjustment layer and then I'll use the smudge tool and I'll get kind of like a bigger brush with like a pretty like defined edge
Okay.
and pretty strong strength. And I'll just sort of like, actually, I'm sorry, smaller brush. I'll push in the edges of the mask and you can see that it like starts to help blend it like very naturally into like a lighter color backdrop. It just helps me with like for safety because this way I feel like I have more options with the background color than I might have otherwise. So it's something I'm still exploring, but it's proven very beneficial.
No, I didn't even. So that's the smudge tool you're using right now.
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, it's something I feel like when I was learning Photoshop and learning how to edit, like I always thought that tools like smudge tool and blur tool were bad because it ruins the pixels, and I was always very hesitant to use them. But it's not something that I ever thought that you could use on like little layer masks, for example.
Yeah.
And so I've been experimenting a lot with like how to implement them to edit the masks that you use to clean up lines or blend things a little more. Which has been very interesting.
Yeah, I think that's really. I wouldn't have thought to use the smudge tool to do this, and it just goes back to the fact that you can really just figure out what works for you and use these tools in whatever way, because there's no really bad way of doing anything. Whatever gets you the result that you want is what you can focus on.
Yeah, and so after I'm done with that, I just relink them to make sure that we don't lose that perfect border. And that gives us like a pretty good base, I think.
Yes.
And then, so what I'll do from here is I will duplicate the layer because I'm going to apply the mask.
Okay.
because then I do get very destructive in my editing. I'm gonna keep a version of it though to be safe, but now
Yes.
I just have this object. You can also see that maybe some very subtle pieces of that background might still be there when I Command T to free transform. It's not making the frame just around the bananas if there was no other information there. So sometimes to be safe too, I will just like quickly select around, inverse and delete, and now we're on a tighter frame. It's again probably not the best way to do it, but
it gets
it's
the
what
job
works for
done.
me.
It's what works for you, and it gets the job done.
Exactly, and especially with like a personal project, I feel like anything goes because it's for you.
Yep, exactly, absolutely.
So now I'm gonna go ahead into liquify, which is something that we're going to be using a lot today to morph these bananas. I just noticed while I was doing the mask that like down here it dips in a little bit, which is annoying me. So I'm just gonna go ahead and like make sure that the shape of my base hair is like as perfect and I guess shapely as it can be.
Yes. We don't want odd shaped bananas. We want them to be nicely shaped.
Exactly. And I know that these bananas are maybe like a good shape, but like super bruised. And the reason why I picked these is just because I thought looking at like weapons, it was like an interesting relationship with the bruises. And it just added more texture and just another like visual intrigue to sort of like clean up as we morph.
I like that. I like, comparing the bruises on the bananas to, the weapons that you're using. So I really enjoy that. And Marina also said you could do alt click, alt C on the mask to see if you have anything left.
Oh.
Is that? I'm on a Mac, so I'm trying to figure out what button that is. But that's another way to get the same results, essentially.
I got all these keys and none of them are.
Thank you for the tip, Marina. I appreciate it. We appreciate it. Awesome. So our bananas are looking.
Looking pretty good. I think they're workable. I feel good about it. So I'm actually gonna start a new document for like the overall file. And so I am just going to make this pretty.
And why do you do that?
I think just because I'm going to be adding so many different files and layers, it confuses me to like keep it all on maybe like this raw file base. And I knew that I wanted more of a vertical composition. I think it's, I thought it was 4x5, but I guess it's somewhere between 4x5 and 4x6. I just kind of stole the dimensions from the final piece, but working with square, I could just as easily like expand my canvas and then work from here. But something about like setting it all up on the raw file feels weird to me. So I just created this new base document. I'm just gonna throw a solid color red on here to start as like the working backdrop. Usually I would shoot the seamless clean, like the red seamless clean to use as the backdrop. But in this specific case, I've really wanted that like very isolated feel. Like I wanted it to feel like things were cut out and sort of pasted together and plopped on. And so I just created like just a color fill layer to do so.
Got it.
And then from here, I'm going to then duplicate the bananas over
to the other layer.
Here. And then you can kind of see that they are like to scale roughly. I can probably scale this up or down a little bit. I should probably work with this as a smart object, but I'm not going to. I just want to make sure that we get our layers in. So I have the base. I'm not going to make you guys watch me cut out 2 more bananas, so I am just going to quickly open these guys.
Awesome. And if you guys have any questions on anything that Aaron is doing thus far, suggestions or comments, feel free to drop them in the chat. And again, if you're over on YouTube and want to join the conversation, head over to Behance so that way you can ask any questions and just have some fun with us in the chat. I think they're talking about monkeys and bananas right now. I don't know how the conversation got there, but it seems like we navigated to talking about the zoo and monkeys and bananas. So
works for me. I
quite
want to still
interesting.
learn more about this banana tool because it's opened up a whole new world to me in many ways. So I just copied over these two bananas that I again already isolated from these base images in Lightroom.
Yeah.
And basically I'm going to group them in a folder to keep them together.
Okay.
And I'm just gonna go in and try to like line them up as closely as I can with this original pair. So it's like, it's almost as if I'm duplicating the pair, but now have them on two separate layers with all the information, basically of just like where they overlay and meet. So it looks like this banana is the front one. My opacity to match it up. It's probably like, I mean, it's not going to be perfect. I know it's not going to be perfect, but it's pretty close. Sometimes what I'll do is in free transform, I'll just warp it and try to like push it together. Cause you know, as you could see, I was hand holding these. And so like the angle might be slightly off. But I know that they're slightly going to be morphed anyway, step by step, but just to create as close as the base as I can.
Yeah.
I'm just going to warp this.
Perfect.
So
that's looking nice. Oh, somebody called Cody said wee woo for the siren in the background.
Sorry about that.
I didn't know if I should acknowledge it or just.
I wasn't sure if you guys could hear it. That's not going to be the only one. It's Beauty of New York.
Beauty of New York. I was like, should I acknowledge it? You know, I was like, oh, that won't be long.
It's all good. I know it's the payoff of like having my desk face a window to try to have like some sort of light. But super drafty, thin windows, I've learned.
Yes. So and then Marina also gave us some clarity. She said, so on Mac, it's use the option. So if you click on option and click with your mouse, then you should be able to see what else is left on the layer mask to clean up. So that's a good.
Oh, sure. Right.
There you go.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah. Sometimes, even though sometimes like I found with this one, like it all looks dark and isolated to me, but then when I went in, I was like, oh, maybe if I super zoom in, I can see that there's like these speckles, for example. Like it's not perfect, so then I can always go back in and paint. Or even just do the selection in here, just to make sure. And then
makes sense.
And delete. But then sometimes when you delete it, then it just gets rid of, it just makes it white again. So then you have to inverse, but then you have this.
Then you have that.
Thin white line, and then you go back in and paint around it.
And it
I do that a lot. But that is a
perfect,
very good call out.
Yes, thank you, Marina, for that tip.
So it looks like this banana is pretty lined up as well. You can see when I toggle like the angles a little different, but it is giving me that information that I needed of the back one. And if I turn this group off, I'm pretty happy with that.
Perfect.
I am gonna hide the base and then just go back in on this second banana and liquify it as well. I actually wonder, so in this drop down too, like this is the last action that you performed. And so sometimes if it's like in the same place, it might even just be able to apply
just apply it.
But I don't think it worked. Okay. I thought it would be cool if it did. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow. Although I don't know if it would just apply it to the original layer that it did, or
if it'll apply it.
Something to explore. So I'm just
Perfect. So we're
gonna
making those adjustments.
bring this bruise out. And then it should be good. Awesome. So now I have like a working pair of bananas after the base.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna try to keep my files organized. My layers organized today. We'll see what happens.
The joys of being on Adobe Live, making sure that like everyone can follow. Whereas when we're doing it by ourselves, like it's just madness. Like I never take the time to organize anything. And then sometimes I'm like, it's nice to make sure it's clear what you're doing, what layer is which.
I was looking back at like my original Photoshop file for this project just to like see how I did it. And I was like, maybe I could set something up for today. And I was looking at the layers. I was like, you know what? We're just going to have to start over because I don't know what I was doing. So now I'm going to kind of do the same treatment to the nunchucks, and I'm going to get that final composition together because I want to have like an anchor of the beginning and of the end so that I can figure out the in-between. Mm-hmm. So similarly to the bananas, I'm going to open this up. And then I'm actually just going to go ahead and drag these other elements that I know that I'm going to need eventually into the same file and just place them.
Oh, okay, so you just drag them over and it'll just add them on top of the file that you already have open. Cool.
Yeah, instead of like, duplicating whatever, they're smart objects for now, which is good. I'm just going to copy this background. I do not need to unlock that. But this is sort of like the same thing really quickly. Color range, selecting around. This one's a little trickier since I am holding the base of this, but this will at least give me like a good beginning step. I also know with this one, like I'm going to totally rework the top of this, so I don't need to worry about the chain at all.
That's good to know, because I was going to ask you, what are you going to do with all, like, it just seemed like there's a lot of cleanup in those chains, but we're not worrying about it.
We're not going to worry about it. Another thing I forgot to mention, but I guess as I start to hopefully more naturally work on hair, is I will just do this quick mask tool, which will make, basically it will show you what you are isolating in like a lighter red overlay. So that way, even in like this, where it might look pretty clear, I can see that there's a slight difference before I go in and refine even more. But I can sort of just like more quickly go in and paint around to make that selection. And then once that looks pretty good, I will option click to get into the selection, make sure that we're clear enough. Also going to go ahead and just get rid of this part of Nunchuck because I know that we're going to come back to that. And then I know that I'm going to probably be replacing the tops of these as well. So that gives us a very rough base. And then using these files, I'm going to get this. I'm just going to rasterize it because that's how I work. I'm going to take the bottom of.
Are you going to take the bottom and apply it?
Exactly. And then I'm going to like start to free transform to try to line up.
That is so smart, because I was wondering how you would clean up your hands. It's like, nah, don't stress about it. Just this is nice and simple, straight to the point.
Exactly. And it's like, it's a black tube, right? So it's like, as long as the lighting is pretty similar, like it's pretty easy to do this. I feel like I wouldn't usually be this sloppy in my base files, but being vulnerable with you guys today, I'm showing for how maybe what you shouldn't be doing, but what works for me. And then I'm also just going back to that base image to see like the natural height or like where that falls. I know that the perspective is slightly different, so I'm going to move it up a little bit. And then I'm just using different free transform tools to really line it up.
Okay.
So that looks pretty good to me, as if we have like our new element. So now I'm just going to focus on this single piece and do the same thing.
Yes.
Invert it, and that's looking pretty good. Just to make sure that there's no edges, I'll then go ahead and paint around them. And then with this one, as you can see, like there's a lot of white of selection, but because this layer only has,
got it.
Let me show you, like this little piece selected out, like I'm not worried about anything that's already, clearly there's nothing there.
Yeah.
So that should give us that.
Hey, look at our nunchucks.
Look
nice
at our
and clean.
nunchucks. I am gonna blend these a little bit more just by creating a pretty big brush, very feathered, to help like morph into, especially just like down that highlight is my main concern, just to make sure that it's like pretty similar. I'll lower this a little just to blend it. Yeah, that looks, it's looking pretty good.
It's looking solid, looking clean.
Looking clean. I'm going to duplicate these and merge them. I like to merge as I go, just because it makes me feel like I'm in a good, like there's no turning back. Sometimes I get really indecisive about my edits, and so it's kind of like a forced way to like just stick with what I did, like in my gut.
Yeah, like, you know what, you made the decision. For better, for worse, you did it already. Exactly. We're gonna commit to it.
We're just gonna commit to it. I'm also gonna go in now and just like clean them up a little bit, just to make sure that they're as clean and dust free and smooth and simple as possible. So I'm just getting rid of some of these spots, and even this like slightly defined highlight down here bothers me, and so we're just going to use like the clone tool on a very low opacity to sort of even that out. And then at the same time we're here, maybe bring out the highlight a little bit in where we blended. That's looking. And then also, instead of liquifying, sometimes, especially with something like this, we can use the clone tool to like fix any imperfect edges.
Yes.
Since it is just so linear, like that.
Perfect.
It's looking pretty good. I'm not too worried about, and this is what I was talking about, shooting against the red. Since I know I'm probably gonna have a clean background, like I like these red reflections in the shadows, just because I think it'll help it fit the scene a little bit more, because that's how it naturally was. Which is great. And I'm just gonna clean up this weird indentation here with the clone tool. And then once I have a base, I use the patch tool a lot more than I ever thought that I would. I don't know why, but I do feel like for bigger areas for blending, it helps.
That's so simple.
And if you're gonna like destroy the pixels in your photo, there are worse ways to do it. So this works for me. All right, so that's looking a lot better, a lot cleaner. Not that you can really tell on here, but it's looking better. So now I'm gonna focus on the top of this guy.
Yes.
I guess the question is how. So I think I'm looking at the right middle tip of this one, and I think this placement looks pretty similar to me. So I'm just gonna pull this down. I'm only gonna focus on this specific part of the image right now.
Okay.
Just gonna get rid of the rest. It's fine. I'm doing the exact same thing that I did with the base.
Yeah. Okay.
On a, lining it up with itself, making sure that it's, it's not going to be perfect in this case, but it's going to be totally close enough to get where we need. That looks pretty good.
Yes, that does.
And then from here, I'll just isolate this one layer. And then color range. Exactly.
I think I'm getting the hang of what you're doing now.
Yeah. It's all very repetitive but effective.
But very effective, yes.
Just clean up around these edges. I was gonna like have this one ready as well, but I kind of felt like it was cheating based off the base files and that chain. Just being like, and then you just isolate it, knowing it was like 4 different elements.
Yeah.
I don't exactly remember how I did the chain, so that'll be something fun for.
Yeah, I think that's the part that I'm so intrigued by is how are we gonna do these chains?
That is such a good question, but we're gonna figure it out.
Yes.
So from here, I'm just adjusting. I know the perspective, I was like tilted down a little bit on this, so I might even manipulate this so that it stretches above what I had, but to match the same perspective. So that's starting to look, this is starting to look a lot more natural. If I come in just to like mask in and out, it's like painting away the front object to, but to still have all the information that you need on the back. Which is, one day maybe there will be a camera that can like somehow capture the depth of things and full information, but we're not there
yet. We're not there yet. But one day.
I don't know how that would work, but we'll see. So now that I have this placed pretty well too, I'm just gonna go back into my isolated base and mask out so that there's no interference, like the original base. Okay. Since I basically don't need it anymore. Just paint that out. Okay, and then with this guy, I think I will create just a sharper edge around him and not even worry about that secondary chain. Just one because I don't know what's gonna happen, but I'm having flashbacks that it was very difficult. Okay, so that which is gonna be fun. Okay, so that looks like a pretty good place to start with that. With this base before adding the chain. I liked this sort of like more natural arc. And so I think I'm gonna try to work with that as much as possible.
Perfect. And real quickly, Aaron, I see that we have some new friends in the chat. So for those that are just joining, if you don't mind just kind of letting everybody know, again, what the project we're working on and what we're doing right now, because we have some new faces popping up.
Sure. So we are manipulating a pair of bananas into a pair of nunchucks in a very Animorph-like style. So right now we're just sort of assembling our base elements to make sure that we have sort of like our point A and point B to work towards.
So when you were planning the shoot, I'm just very intrigued with like how intentional you were with like shooting these nunchucks in 3 different ways, keeping in mind like how you might morph everything else together later on.
Yeah, so I really prioritized like the base composition and the cross first. I tried to get more extreme versions, and then as I was shooting, I realized like they should cross probably more at the top. The bananas cross more at the top naturally, so it might like create a nice pairing. And then I knew just from like having them hanging on fishing wire that the chain was not going to look good no matter what I did without like very intense rigging. And so, which isn't something that I could do that day. So I shot this chain separate. I knew if I had enough information, or if it was like cleanly laid out like this, like I can probably now use just this, hopefully, to create the chain and to link like a very organic shape. And then I also just made sure that I shot each element of the nunchuck, like the base and the tips of it, to have the full information very clean. So it's a very like sterile way at looking at photography. And I feel like, especially with this project, it was one of the more straightforward approaches that I've had, just like making sure that I was getting every piece, every bit and piece that I would maybe need. But I think that's also been an interesting like awakening of my work, and something that
Mm-hmm.
I've learned over the last few years too is like sometimes that's just necessary, and photo is just like the jumping off point to create the work that I want.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes it can be more exciting to me in the post process than in the actual shooting process,
Mm-hmm.
which I never thought would be the case. Like I
Mm-hmm.
love the feeling when you're just like shooting something and you can see your vision coming to life, and you can see maybe what other people can't when you're doing it. I think that's always been like the most intriguing part of photo for me.
Mm-hmm.
But now I'm sort of also finding intrigue in like the aftermath of it, and looking at like, well, how can I get that same feeling doing something like this, where I like capture a bunch of different elements very like coldly and straightforward, and like how can I, like, because I know in this case like I couldn't have done this, I can't actually manipulate the bananas to become the
Mm-hmm.
nunchucks in real life, um, in a photo. So how can I do it in post, and how can I
Got
explore
it.
that?
Got it. Got
So
it.
it's a new way of thinking for me, but it's
Yes.
fun. So in this chain, I'm also, while I'm here, just going to, I think the only place that this fishing wire really intersects, yeah, in the front of the chain is
Mm-hmm.
on these two. So I'm also going to go in with the clone stamp and try to mask that out, just to create some sort of suggestion of like a very clean chain, mimicking that like highlight and
Mm-hmm.
shadows front. So far, so good. I don't want to jinx it, but it's a relief.
Mm-mm. And then Ferry also asked, why am I really familiar with this voice? Did I watch him last year? Did you do an
Maybe
Adobe?
this long, just monotone voice. Yes, I think the last time I was on was probably last January. I've done things at Max a few times. And then also before that, I was in the Adobe Creative Residency program.
Yes. How was
Um,
that experience?
it was really, really great and special. And so I did it 2018 to 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very challenging year and a very like overwhelming year, but it was the year that really allowed me to like come into my own and to pivot. As I mentioned in the beginning, I was working and focusing on like fashion and portraiture,
Mm-hmm.
which was great. But I again like fell in love with food over the years, and it was just showing up in my work so much. I was working freelance a little bit as a fashion photographer,
Mm-hmm.
but nothing in the food space. So knowing that I wanted to sort of start focusing more on that, I wasn't sure how I could do that without feeling like I
Yeah.
was starting over somewhere in a career.
Mm.
And I think especially like in a major city or working in any sort of like big industry, like I felt
Mm-hmm.
like I put in like 5 years in New York of just feeling like I was finding my footing in the fashion space.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really hesitant to feel like I was starting over
Yeah.
in a city that was very tough to live in. And so the residency just worked out to be this great thing that gave me that year to pivot. And I
To help make
definitely,
that transition. Yeah.
exactly, and to empower me to feel like I really could. And it's definitely not something that I ever thought would actually work out, but I like
Mm-hmm.
took it as a sign. I'd work out in the sense of like actually pivoting
Yeah.
away from
Yeah.
fashion.
Yeah.
And I sort of just like committed as much as I could, and it was really, really special. So
And
yeah,
here
so
you are now.
here I am. So you've probably heard me like talk ad nauseum about food for the last few years here and there.
It's exciting how that really played just a big role in your transition within your career, because it's such different work from the fashion portraiture, and it's such specific work as well. But
It's
it's
super
it's
specific. And
but it,
it's been nice too. I mean, at first too, like I'm not a very superstitious person, but it was one of those things where I was like, if it's meant to be, if I'm meant to transition,
yeah,
I will get
yeah.
this program. And then it happened, and I was like, okay. But there was no question that it's like, okay, I want to do this, and we're gonna
Hmm.
do it. but on the flip side too, like working as a freelance photographer, I found it really interesting because food is very specific, but it's also very universal, and it's very, people can relate to it in many different ways. And so I think now too, especially in the digital landscape, like food is a great way. It's an instant connector, right?
Yeah.
And so I found that I work with a lot of lifestyle clients or clients in tech or in entertainment that you wouldn't necessarily think overlap with food. But there's a shared interest there where we'll use food in one of their campaigns or for some of their content to, help reposition their marketing or their messaging in a very direct way. But on top of that too, like it's been very interesting to experience a full circle, like picking back up some of the fashion clients or portraiture clients, just more in line with maybe like my approach as a product and food photographer now. That's been really cool to see, because I think at first it felt like I was choosing and like had to stay in one lane, but I've been trying to like ease up on that and just see what happens.
Exactly. Explore and see what else. You never know what else is, meant for you.
Exactly.
Awesome.
And I think especially in the last 2 years, like I've been craving connection with like people and being on set again with people. So any opportunity to work with people again has been really nice to like shoot them and spend the day with them.
Yeah.
It's lovely.
That's exciting. Fairy has another comment. And hey, Fairy being all the the Adobe lives that I be on, I be remembering that name. And they always have such great questions. But they're asking, what is photography to you?
Photography to me, that's a good question. I think it's my biggest tool to explore, and the biggest way that I know how to express myself and to sort of like make sense of a world and a situation that overwhelms me every day. It's the tool that leaves me feeling in control and like I'm able to have a voice and a point of view.
I love that, especially when you said a tool that makes you feel like you're in control. That I resonate with so much.
Yeah, it's definitely like, as I was talking about before too, like in this project, especially specifically, like it feels like such a tool and such a cold tool, because it really wasn't a traditional approach to how I would usually think about photographing something. But it's also, I think, empowered me and opened my eyes on like ways that I can continue to push what photography is to me and how I can use it. I think along with that too, I do a lot of stop motion work, which some of you might have seen in the beginning. And that comes from like a place of, I always wanted to go into film and I always thought that I would be a filmmaker. But that was before I like really discovered photography. And that became this sort of like innocent exploration, trying to tiptoe back into like motion and creating narratives through moving images. And I just sort of like never moved beyond that, the stop motion. And I think it was just like right place, right time. It's something that I like definitely never thought I would be doing as a career, and definitely something that I always kind of liked doing, but never fully explored until the Adobe creative residency. That was something that I felt like I could really sink my teeth into. So even looking at photo in other mediums, but as the base, has been really beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I am cleaning up this chain. I'm now connecting the chain to the top of the nunchuck. Again, just sort of like blending with my adjustment masks. I think I'm just going to take the very, very top of this, and then I applied another mask to the base, which I can then go back in and add.
And clean up a little bit.
See that the highlights sort of like doubling up. So I'm going to lower this layer down a little bit, clean this up a little bit more. Okay. Now I just have to connect it down here, but that's looking pretty good. I feel I feel good about.
Yes, that looks really good.
Continuing on with my decisiveness, I'm going to copy these and merge them
Yes.
to get where we're at so far. And then I'm going to copy the top of this.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know eventually it's gonna have to connect, and I'm gonna try to do that down here. So there's hopefully only going to be a few links missing, and then I'll be able to connect it from here.
Okay.
I hope.
Gosh, the magic behind all of this.
No, so I try not to take for granted anymore, like very simple, clean images that I see. I always thought, like, I'm always like, it's so simple. And then I like do something. I'm like, it actually takes a lot of work.
Yeah, it does.
A lot effortless. And in some cases it might be like this, where like maybe I could have shot it a little bit neater. But in a lot of cases, I'm like, well, when you have a base image or composition that is that clean, like it takes a lot of work to make it appear that crisp and that straightforward.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is feeling pretty good. I'm also going to, because I know the chain was sticking out on the right, I'm just going to copy over the left side of this base. Yeah, like this is probably a detail that people would not see anyway, but it makes me feel like I'm doing my job to make sure that it appears realistic.
Yeah.
And again, with adjustment masks, just going in and getting rid of.
That's clean.
Yeah, and then like there's still some overlap, but I will merge these layers back down, use that handy patch tool and try to like smooth it out a little bit, maybe mimicking these highlights. I mean, we're 600% zoomed in, but that looks pretty good.
Look how, that looks clean. Okay.
Yeah. There's a method to the madness always, right? Everybody has their. And then from here, I'm just going to position it kind of where I have that information of where the chain comes out on the other side. And then I can sort of just choose, like I see it kind of falls towards the bottom on this one. I'm gonna cut it off like kind of midway. And then I could either try to copy this over from a different photo, or I could maybe create like a levels overlay, create something super dark, like freakishly dark, and then use my brush tool to sort of paint in the shadows on a lower opacity, just where it like intersects to create that indent.
That is such attention to detail.
And it's very much like trial and error. Like maybe this isn't the best way to be doing it, but for the sake of now, I think it will work.
Yeah.
Couldn't tell you what I did originally. So.
I think that's the best part. Sometimes when you go back and re-edit, it's like, I don't know how I did this first time, but I'm gonna do it another way. Or if I can, it's just hard. It's not the easiest to like recreate what you may have done before.
Exactly. So I'm almost intersected. I think I can see a clear ending here. So I'm actually just going to get rid of the rest of this chain up here. So, like we're so close.
Yes.
Let me see what I have. I mean, that looks... Maybe we can try pulling from this image, something in here. I ended up buying like a worthy amount of just like loose chains for the shoot as well, because I did have to like make a lot of the weapons or like finesse them in a way that I thought would look the best. And so I learned so much about the market for chains, which is not something that I ever thought that I would have to do.
I'm sure. But hey, you never know until
you never know
until you have to.
It's part of the fun of doing something so specific. I think sometimes it's just like, okay, new skill, maybe new information that I would never care to learn about otherwise. So now I'm just going to go back into this left chain on free transform to try to like line up, well, maybe not, or to try to like line up more where that intersection is with the other.
That looks
pretty good.
That looks really good. It's just so crazy how you can use different elements of your images to just bring everything together. Like you literally were like, oh, I can use this portion of the chain. I can use this. I can use that. And it just comes together so nicely.
Yeah, it is the payoff with something like that set up at like F18 and ISO 200, where it's just like, if everything is in the right perspective and, you know, like set up at the same point of view and distance, then I can like take those different elements.
Exactly.
Whereas sometimes maybe if I was like behind the camera and rigging it and moving it to look super, super perfect, then like they might all be different sizes and it might be harder for me to piece together.
Absolutely.
So this works for me, but now see, I already have too many layers and I'm like, what's going on? Okay, so we have the base, we have the chain, we have the shadow, and we have these. Okay, we're back. I'm just gonna put these in like another group so I don't get confused. Here, go in and just paint out those final details. I think I need to bring this down a little so that it really intersects. It might not be perfect. This might be something that I clean up overnight, but just to give us the base idea of linking. So I guess it would technically go behind one side,
and then up on the
front on the other, and then I'll just have to fill it in with that link. And over here, what's going on? Same thing. See? Okay, and then I can see on my base chain here, maybe I need to get rid of, just kind of like mimic the shape of that chain. Have it go over on this side and then over here. But again, same thing. Like I can tell that I'm gonna need to like comp in a few more things, but I'm not going to bore you guys with that today. I'll just go ahead though and make sure that like the base shape is there. See that I have a little spill over here. I guess the one last thing I'll do on this is I will unlink my layers like I did in the beginning and use that smudge tool just to clean up. I think some of the red up here makes sense to clean up just because it shouldn't spill over as much.
Yeah.
And since I know that it's like not a natural link, it probably shouldn't be there. But that should help us for now. At least with just like placement overall. Just finalize that detail by making sure that I can see I missed some things down here as a safety. Okay. Great. I'm gonna say that's good enough.
I think so.
So I'm just gonna go ahead, duplicate these, merge them as one so that we have and now I can go in and add this to our
Yep, exactly.
Okay, so especially on red, like it's
Yay.
looking pretty good.
Yes, it's looking clean, looking clean.
So now what I think makes the most sense to do is not put it in that folder. Um, is to create that beginning and that end point, right? So I think first things first, the scale, like I understand that maybe they're the same size right now, but these feel like maybe the banana should grow into something a little bit bigger. So I'm thinking that might look pretty good. It's cheating a little because you guys saw the final composition. So I know that I was going to work diagonally from the bottom left to the top right. So I think I'm going to like roughly place these down here or up here. And then I'm going to try to move all my bananas down here. And I'm also going to start these a little bit more curved, I feel like.
Yeah, so you can kind of see how
frame a little better, and
you can see how it'll like at least what you're preparing for that transition. So that's really nice.
Yeah, and then I just like had these duplicate bananas selected when I did that as well to make sure that they were at the same spot. I guess the question now is to figure out like how many steps I want to showcase between the two. And so at the same time though, like I know that I'm probably going to want to work off manipulating each step instead of like copying and pasting these two bananas all the way. Like I think to keep consistent with how I'm morphing things, like I'm going to want to like work one at a time. And then I also know that usually I feel like I would keep these over top, but I want to clearly see what that first base is. So I'm going to probably have to work backwards than what I'm usually used to for layers. I'm just going to get rid of this background and lock in this color for now as the base so that I don't confuse myself any further. Okay, so we have, let's see. So I think the first thing to prioritize is really just like morphing the overall shape, and then I'm going to worry about like the texture and the tones and all of that. So these are like pretty much mirrored, but I can probably start to just rotate this top banana a little bit more. I think just judging based on like what I have here is maybe it'll take like 4 to 5 steps in between, depending on what reads clean. And I think I'll just like fill that out as I go. But what I'll now do is using liquify, is I'm going to start to like straighten out the bananas one at a time. For reference, sometimes I like to have the backdrop selection on so that I can like look at the shape and like look at where I'm from. In this case, like I don't know if it's as necessary because it will kind of show you like what you're starting from, but sometimes that is helpful for, you know, seeing like if you're doing too much of an adjustment or not. I think like that's a good place to start, and then I can just unselect it and then go back in and make sure that like I'm keeping the same width around the whole thing. And you can also see that I was working with like a pretty big brush just to like keep those pixels, like pushing them all around instead of just a few, to keep it like as clean and crisp of an image as I possibly can. So it's a very subtle, but you can see that we're starting to strain out. And then I'm just going to go ahead and do the same thing with this guy. So we're going in, I'm just using this, it's called the forward warp. Finish on the backdrop. And I'm just thinking about like straightening out the tip down a little and forcing the top of this too.
Clever said, whip that banana into a nunchuck.
Exactly. It's looking pretty good. So I'm gonna go ahead and make a copy of these. Again, knowing that I'm probably gonna wanna like keep them below. I'm gonna start to rotate them a little bit more upright if I'm like prioritizing that intersection and cross of where they're gonna be. And I will probably like manipulate the exact composition a lot later.
Okay.
But just for now, getting that like rough placement to know how many steps I need is probably the most beneficial. And then I also know for this, like I'm not gonna make the banana. It's something that I considered, but like grow the chains between the two. I just think it would like read less clean as an image. So I do know though that I want the tips of them to sort of mimic the metal tips on the weapon. So I'm also gonna start to think about like what that might mean for the tips, being able to start to like square those up.
Got it.
And bring those down. Just, things you would never thought you'd be talking about or thinking about. It's part of the fun.
It's part of the fun.
This down. Start to force it a little bit more. See that I've done sort of enough, I can go back in and refine. To down more. I am using keyboard shortcuts. I feel like we all have our go-tos, but for liquify, for brush sizes anyway, it's proved very useful between like not only brushes, but the clone tool and just every tool, smudge tool now of like just being able to scale up and down as I need. There we go. Okay. I feel like I've done a lot to this one, so yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
I don't want to jump too far ahead, but I also need to make sure that I get there. So now I'll just do the same over here. Straighten this out. Straighten this out. Bring this guy. That was a lot, but I'll start to widen him at the base to bring.
Got it.
It's like you can start to see that it's slowly. I'm gonna name this banana 3. This is banana 2.
Yeah, this is where labeling is very important because you have so many different bananas here.
Many. The thing that I forgot too is I guess I should think about the scale sort of increasing. So I'm gonna slowly increase them in groups so that it feels even. And then I think I'm actually gonna, just to make sure that I'm on the right track, and I'll relabel accordingly, but I might just like try to see what the final shape of these might look like to see like the in-between that I need to fill in.
Okay.
So it's looking like the top, it's looking like these are flipped. It's looking like I'm gonna want it like this. So now now I also have enough that I can then go in and start to manually, so I'm like, I think this split is a big enough jump between the base that now with this guy, I can start to curve it.
Got it.
And actually, I think I was right initially about the order of these. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Maybe that looks good on that
one.
But then once we start to jump forward a little bit more. There we go. Just getting more of that effect. So yes, so with these, I'm going to try to manipulate them as close to the shape as possible to get that like second to last step so that I can then maybe fill it in with like 1 or 2 others.
Got it.
So,
how long would you say in general, especially as we're going through this, how long would you say it takes you to go from start to finish and really getting everything where you want it to be? Or does it, I guess it just probably would depend on what your concept is, but on average.
I think it depends. I think with these, it was probably like a 4 to 5 hour period for each one. They definitely got a little quicker as I went, just because I figured out like things that I was telling you guys about, like going one at a time, or maybe creating this end one. Like I just learned by trial and error while going. You can also see I just use like the warp tool and before liquifying, just to make sure that I could like do the overall manipulations maybe before going and like refining even more. I feel like most edits usually don't take me 4 to 5 hours a piece, but I could also honestly sit here all day and tweak this composition, just because I'm like, well, what if we add one more? What if we make them go the opposite way? What if? And so there also kind of comes a point where once I hit like the base image, I feel like I will force myself to like step away for 10 to 15 minutes and come back. And if my eyes aren't jumping to something immediately, I'm like, all right, it's going to be done.
Yeah.
Like we're going to call that a day.
Yeah. It is so important to step away. That's something that I have to do when I'm editing as well. I'll just get so drawn into it, and I'll be spending like so much time on editing an image, and it's just like, okay, hey, I'm satisfied with this right now. I'm going to walk away, go have some lunch, dinner, watch a TV show, do something, go for a walk, and then come back and be able to be like, all right, if anything doesn't jump out, then we're good to go.
Totally. I have 2 brothers, and when I like growing up, one of their rooms was right across the hall from me when I was getting into this in high school, and I used to like pester him all the time to come in, look at the image, and like tell me if he noticed anything, or like show him, like I would like turn on an adjustment layer that had like a 5% opacity and be like, which version? And be like, I don't see a difference. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so I try to do that to myself now, where if I do step away, or like even like looking back at the series, like I'm sure when I finished this a couple of months ago, like I was noticing things, I was super annoyed, maybe like the layering of the bananas, and now I'm looking and I'm like, if I can't see it on the final, like that's good, that's sign of good growth, and like it's good that I walked away when I did.
Exactly.
So now I'm just sort of like toggling in between the warp and the liquefied to like basically try to center this tip to match the middle tip a little bit more.
Okay.
You can also start to see that, like you can see the effects of the direct manipulation a little bit more now. But I'm also not as worried about that, because I know eventually too, these will be like darkened and simplified.
Got it. Okay.
So like it's more just prioritizing that shape to make sure that it's like pretty in line with.
Got it.
Shot. So that way I can do things like this where I just put it all together. Okay, that's feeling pretty good. And then I can just double check it like this. We're getting there. I think they need to go a little thinner. Beautiful.
There we go. Yeah, that's nice.
As beautiful as we can call this beautiful.
Yay.
Do the same thing with this guy. The other option too is I could always try to layer it directly over the nunchucks, which I might try to do just for the composition, and then like figure out the width and manipulate it on top, which is another approach. But I feel like these are much simpler than some of the other ones, and so I feel confident enough to try to do it by itself. This one, I know I'm shortening it to get like a clean base, but now I can go back in and try to keep it the same length. All right, and now it's just the top of this guy.
Yeah.
We are getting there.
We're getting there. We are getting there. I hope you guys are enjoying this. I'm like so intrigued by all of this, because it's just like, oh my goodness. So I hope y'all are enjoying the live just as much as I am. Again, if We have we're getting close to finishing. We still have some time left, but if you're over on YouTube, make your way over to Behance. If you guys have any questions that you want to ask, we'll obviously be back tomorrow, but if you have any questions that you want to get in today, feel free to drop them in the chat box so we can make sure that we ask Aaron them. Beautiful.
I feel like it's a lot of repetitive steps, but the payoff is rewarding.
The payoff is rewarding. And now it's like, I can see how this is starting to form into the nunchucks. Like,
yeah. It's not that crazy. Okay. Somehow I've lost the scale on this, so I'm just going to go ahead and line these up. And then place them a little bit closer. Feels like I might even just honestly thin these out a little bit more and just use free transform to and to the width and the length that I need. So that's starting to look, we're getting there. Now I can go back in and just continue to make these adjustments to mirror it a little bit more. Now this one is looking like it's like stretched at a weird angle, which I did not realize before, so I can just go back and continue to refine it.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, I can like I will continue to like probably refine the shape and the placement as I get closer to the final composition, but I think this gives us like a pretty good idea. I'm gonna call this 6, thinking that maybe we'll need at least 2 more to get to this sort of final spot. I'm gonna just place this here for now. I can continue to copy my pair on the left back here.
And there we go.
To straighten out. So it looks like the biggest priority is really starting to push those curves a little back a little more. I'm going to turn off these layers. Maybe I can even just do it with the warp tool. I've been so used to liquifying, I just try to scale my brush for literally no reason. To like really start to jump, even that might work. This guy. I think we're definitely going to leave off at a very like weird place today. So hopefully it's enough to entice people to come back tomorrow.
It will be. I feel like everybody is so like mind blown with the banana and nunchucks, and from what I've seen in the comments, they'll be back tomorrow.
They're like, what are they
We've committed this much, so we have to see what this final image looks like.
Exactly. And I think this is probably the one where it's gonna like cross over the most as well to get to that opposite side. Now I think just need to manipulate the tops of them before moving to the next pair. I have my brush tool back. Right. It's nice now that I have that like final-ish pair too, that I know like I know the slight technique to get there without. It is tricky to like think about it like when you isolate it. If you look too much at it, you're like, it just looks so weird. And like that's I think where I overthink and struggle a little bit, where I'm like, but it's not quite that tip and it's not quite a banana. And that was like a big learning curve with the series too, is like, how do I make the middles of each morph visually intriguing, but clean enough, but also like just like learning to let go a little bit with like that it can look a little abstract, because the overall effect, you're not looking back as closely.
Exactly.
It's I think more about just like, especially if I'm going to do something where I'm like showing almost the step-by-step process in this of like letting go a little bit and trusting that like, as long as you're not leaving any distractions in, then like
Mm-hmm.
the overall effect will work. So that looks
Exactly.
cropped.
Oh, that looks so
So
good.
we're getting there. I'm gonna scale these last two up a little. Go into continue to straighten them out almost all the way, and then I think the 6 pairs is a comfortable amount, and that should work. Sounds like the construction guys are back, so if you hear any drilling, there hasn't been another ambulance, but there's definitely some drilling going on.
Yeah, I don't think I can hear the drilling, so I think we're pretty solid there. Yeah.
I feel like I said the same thing a year ago. They've been doing the same construction for years.
You know,
broken record is.
Sometimes that's how it goes. That is how it goes.
It sure is. I know. I wish when I signed this lease, like maybe I could have looked around a little more, but I was like, oh, nobody mentioned a 5-year construction plan going on.
Probably would have been good to know, but hey.
No regrets. It's just something that I tune out now, but and especially like working from home client calls and these sort of things, everyone's like, what's that weird humming or back? I'm like, oh, it's just,
yeah.
People doing a lot of work.
It's New York.
Right? It's also a great alarm clock, honestly. Like they start pretty early and I'm like, now I'm up. Like it's 7 o'clock and I'm up. All right, that's looking I'm pretty happy with that.
Yes, that's looking really nice.
So now that I have the bases, I know too, I can maybe like refine the overall composition as a whole. Maybe even I want to leave some negative space around the whole thing. So I might even scale everything down a little bit more, just because I feel like there's so much going on in the middle. I want the eyes to be able to breathe and to take a beat.
Yes.
But it's feeling pretty good. I might even in the gaps, I think like the negative space is important so that you can kind of see what's going on.
Yeah, you can see the transition occurring, so that's nice.
I was playing around with the idea of like these sort of being in the back to follow that sort of like one after the other overlay, but I think it is important to like kind of have it in front at the end to like get that full effect. Like I think there's enough going on there. Like, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
So I feel pretty good about that. And then we will just somehow I've worked my way to the right of the frame. We will come back into the center.
Perfect.
That's pretty good. Okay, so the shapes feel pretty good. And so now it's more about the texture and the, getting it from that yellow to like that really dark, clean black. And so I at least know on the final pair that these probably have to be like super clean. So I'm just going to go in one at a time. I don't have to worry about as much where they're overlapping, but I do know that like this top mark is really distracting. So I'm going to go in and kind of do the same thing that I was doing while refining the base images, is I'm going to try to like just clean them up and create more of just like a cleaner base to work with using the clone and the pattern tool. And again, like, because I do know that these are going to go super dark, I don't need it perfect. I just need it like better. And more spot free. So just playing around with different opacities, maybe picking up some of that like freckly texture. I think do good. Yes. So that feels. See though, even like where you can see it tearing, I might try to move this up and blend this in to create something just like really clean. And again, I think it's like learning to let go in the in-between steps, that it's just like it's it might look weird when it's isolated, but it's definitely less distracting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Overall. Let's see. So I should probably get rid of at least some of this here. Down here as well. Place to start with that, and then I'll just do the same thing over here.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to like end on a real cliffhanger of like the colors shifting. I'm like, I guess I could get started on that, but also I'm like, maybe it'll help people.
Listen, it might be like a nice build up, and it's like, oh my goodness, right? Like what are we gonna do tomorrow? And that's a good segue because we have about 5-ish minutes left, y'all. If you have been here throughout the whole live, thank you. Shout out to you. If you joined us at some point, thank you. And shout out to you as well. If y'all have any questions, comments that you want to make before we end today, please put them in the chat. Of course, we'll be back tomorrow. But thank y'all for sticking around. This has been really exciting. Done a lot of cleanup.
I could do this all day. Bananas, I've learned, they're like way more sensitive than I ever thought. Like even just like I literally yesterday I was doing a project with bananas, and like even just like looking at the stills from like the first shot to the last of like how they react under heat, and like if there's something resting on them or like propped up or whatever, like the amount of bruises and spots it's kind of crazy. I'm probably overdoing the texture, but
hey,
again, I want to like get that full effect. Like, what could it look like clean before we basically erase all of the information on it?
So you're just going back and forth between the clone and patch tool. And look how clean that's looking.
Pretty clean. There's definitely like a more involved and refined way that I usually will like clean up texture and tones and everything. Maybe tomorrow I can like get into that and show you guys. But for now, especially knowing that these are going to be like so dark, and I'm doing like a very rough, quick, destructive job on destroying this.
But while you are cleaning up and wrapping this up, I think it might be nice to let everybody know what we're going to be doing tomorrow. So what's our plan, Aaron?
So our plan tomorrow is, now that we have the base sort of files all set up, we're going to finalize it by playing with the tones and the colors to really create that transition from yellow to the dark. And then we'll just like sort of refine any last minute shapes and composition. I can maybe show you guys quickly how to animate it, or it's just a different way of looking at it, bringing it to life, sort of isolating each step by step to show that effect from the banana to the nunchuck. And then we, time permitting, will jump into a new one.
Yay! And what program do you use to animate in?
Just all in Photoshop. So basically what we're gonna do is just treat each pair of bananas and then the nunchucks as like a separate sort of frame, and just like be able to look at it sort of bounce between back and forth. Just like a fun little touch. I think because I do so much animation work, it's a nice, I think about that more now of like, well, how can I like bring to life a still image, and how can I showcase this differently, if not even just for a final piece as like a process piece, to explore it a little bit more.
Yeah. Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So yeah, I see. Thank you, Cody, for dropping Aaron's website. So if y'all,
Thank you.
in preparation for tomorrow, there's a lot of anticipation. We got to see what this final image looks like, as well as the animation. But make sure y'all go to Aaron's website. Also head over to his Instagram, follow him. Show him some love. If you maybe already head over there, you probably already saw the final image. But hey, you get to see how we get there tomorrow.
Exactly.
And just some last minute things before we start to wrap up. We will be back tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. Pacific for part 2 with Aaron. But I do want y'all to stick around for the illustration daily creative challenge, which daily creative challenge, with Andrew Hockrattle. Immediately followed by the packaging design with Chris Porter. You're going to be able to watch and learn alongside creative director Chris Porter as he works on branding and packaging designed for a fictional beverage company in Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop. So that sounds exciting. So make sure y'all stick around for that. I'm excited to come back tomorrow and see what this looks like. I learned a lot, especially with it's just so crazy how I love being able to see people's process, because it's so crazy to see how we go from like an image and create like a story out of it. So literally going from a pair of bananas and nunchucks and now creating a story of, food being, a weapon. And so this is really exciting, Aaron. So thank you so much for showing us through all of this.
Of course. Thanks for chugging through with me. I appreciate it.
Of course, anytime. So we will be back tomorrow. Until then, y'all stick around for the next stream and we will see you then.
Thanks.
Bye.